Dam Lake Health. I appreciate everybody taking time to come out here on 6 o'clock on a Thursday. I deeply appreciate your time. I think we all have a vested interest in where we're going with this. How come I can't get my slides to work? Okay, that's better. Okay, so first of all, we got Erica, you're on. Fred, you're on. Dave said he would not be able to make it. I believe Kevin said he could not make it, and I don't believe Colette is making it. Is that correct, Erica?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I want to include Molly with the members because she said she did want to become part of it.
Okay. Yep, we'll roll her under the residents. So we got Molly, who's
Ah,
part of it.
okay.
Neil, thank you so much as always for contributing. Chris, how you doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing well. And Lily.
Hi, I'm eating, sorry.
That's okay, as long as I don't see you swimming out there right now.
Not yet, probably.
I know, it's gonna happen soon. Okay, so
Thanks.
just fundamentals, this is gonna take about an hour. We'll start now. I'll plan to finish up by 7 o'clock. Please be on mute unless you're speaking, just to keep things focused. Erica, if you could, just keep me in line with my time. If I'm taking too long, falling behind, I appreciate it. And I'll take the minutes the best I can. If anybody could back me up, I'd appreciate that as well. The last Lake Health Committee meeting we did have was in February. We had a bunch of actions we got out from that we had worked on, which we'll cover that as part of the status here. As everybody could see by the lake being filled to where it is currently, our focus the board has been focusing on, including myself, very heavily on driving the schedule and activities to promote the dam completion and lake refill. Last I checked, we were about 4.5 feet from the second hold point. Measuring the increase every day, we're going up about 3 inches every day. So I'm still projecting, this is my projections, nobody else's. I'm expecting we're going to be up to the hold point by the middle of May. My target has always been by Memorial Weekend. Just so we have some common ground. Our mission statement is to develop, communicate, and implement a lake health management plan that identifies key activities necessary to maintain and improve the Heath, should be health, the Beaver Dam Lake environment for the Lake District. And the vision through teamwork and strong community ownership, transition and maintain Beaver Dam Lake health to top decile performance in New York State with no loss of use due to harmful algae blooms. The reason we live on the lake is to be able to use it. The last thing we want to do is allow the utilization to be impacted or diminished because we weren't able to maintain the health of the lake with, and we get the harmful algae blooms that prevents us from being able to go on the lake. For the purpose of this, do not be afraid to say anything, lay everything out there. We're not grading anybody. This is everybody's contributions. And so I appreciate all input on it. Everybody's going to be respected. We're looking for all innovation. I'm looking for the teamwork, and I'm looking for ownership so we don't do this all alone ourselves as the board members. And most of all, do everything with integrity. The key topics that we're going to talk about today is the elephant in the room, which will be the plant vegetation and management, lake testing program, the lake treatment program, and then you can't talk about the lake health without talking about fish and aquatic life program. Anybody have any comments before we keep going? Okay. The outcome from this, just keep everybody focused. I don't want to confuse activity with accomplishment. What I don't want to do is spend an hour going through talking about what the lake's all about and the lake health, and then come away with absolutely no actions where we don't go do something. So what I am looking for at the end of this is the short-term actions, and that'll be defined as actions we have to complete right now while the lake is filling, because we're on a short stick right now to get that going. And then the long term, after we get the lake filled, what we need to do to establish and maintain a healthy lake. As we talked about last time, always think in terms of prevention, detection, and correction. We always want to be in the prevention mode. We don't want to be in the correction mode. It costs a lot more, and that means we're being impacted by it. So we want to be in the prevention. The detection is more about we need to make sure we're doing the testing so we don't get to the correction mode also. As a team member contributing today, be asking yourself always, what does this mean to me and how can I make a difference? Okay, and this is just somewhat of a refresher. I want everybody to be thinking about when we talk about our lake health, the lake itself is influenced by many things. We have external things, which is our watershed, which goes into our lake, And we have the internal things, which is the things that are already in the lake, which is like the sediment soil, the vegetation that's out there decaying, effects of past chemical treatments, which eventually do release any phosphorus that was locked up over time. On the external loading, that's where we really want to try to focus. This is more of the prevention mode when we get into looking at the streams, the tributaries, the storm runoff, and getting all our lakefront property owners on board so we're all aligned exactly where we need to be. So we know what fertilizers impact the lake health, what buffers we could be putting on the shorelines of all of our properties, get everybody involved. So we want to be focusing ultimately on the causes, try to prevent those things before they become symptoms. That makes sense to everybody. Okay, so first off, well, which again, I call this the elephant in the room right now, the plant vegetation and management. As the lake is filling, which is awesome. And one of the things we did anticipate is the vegetation was going to do one of three things. And one of the three things was it is buoyant, it's going to float, and it's going to end up somewhere. And we'd like to try to remove it if we can. The prevailing winds off of the lake are to the east. So what's happening, obviously, all the vegetation as it floats gets pushed by the currents and the wind down into the eastern coves. So those people that live up there on the lakefront in the eastern coves, you're seeing the impacts of the floating vegetation right now. We did have a couple emails from residents over the past week expressing not just their interest, but also that they'd like to be involved to remediate this as short order as we possibly can. Okay, so what we did is to took on board as quickly as we could. We need to discuss the issues with Orange County DPW and DEC, just so they're on board so they know what we're doing about this. I don't expect much of pushback from them unless there's going to be money involved, which I anticipate there will be money involved, but we'll work with them as necessary to work through the fundamentals of that part of it. The second part was to discuss options with Northeast Aquatic Research. That was the company that did the vegetation study for us last year and came away with a bunch of recommendations. I did have a chance to talk to them, and I'm going to cover that in detail on one of the later slides. They're incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly helpful, and we'll go through what they're recommending. The next part was, okay, now here's our options. What can we do about it? That we need to talk to a company that actually deals with remediation options and costs associated with that. In the past, one of the companies we've had on board was Solitude Lake Management. They have the equipment necessary to do what's called mechanical harvesting. I'm not saying that's where we're going to end up because I'm not sure we'll have the budget or the time to even put all that in place. But if we can't get there, we have to look at other options to get it out. But that is one of the options. Effectively, what they do, they bring their equipment out. It's floating equipment, has three pieces of equipment. One is something like a conveyor belt, basically, and a barge that they put out, a small barge that you put out onto the lake. It all floats. And they harvest the weeds into the device, take it over to the shoreline. They use the conveyor to offload that into a truck for disposing. So it's pretty simple, and quite honestly, it looks like a lot when you're down there looking at it, but I don't anticipate it would take probably more than 1 to 2 days if you have the right equipment to approach it. But that's for them to come away with, but that's what we are looking at. I'm going to cover that in more detail, but does anybody have any questions or comments on that before we proceed? Okay. The next is the aquatic plant management. The aquatic plant management, I have discussed I think Tom Corl had recommended this also because in his past, he was one of the chair for the board here, and he has a lot of experience with this lake, a lot more than probably most of us do here. One of the things he had said that he had thought would be very, very good was what's called drain downs of the lake in the wintertime. And what that does for you, when you drain it down, it allows the shoreline to be exposed. And what it does, it freezes off the vegetation around the perimeter and ultimately dies off, and it helps maintain a healthy lake. In the past, we didn't really have good utilization of devices to be able to do that. Right now, our sluice gates, which we have been using quite a bit for the fill, we have an 18-inch and a 24-inch sluice gate. They are very functional, and they actually will help us if we want to go in that direction. So that is a viable opportunity if we want to approach it. I did have a long talk with DEC Mike Fratz about this. He wasn't sure if we would need permits to be able to do this, but he said that Greenwood Lake and Orange Lake, they do that evolution periodically. Those lakes do require permits. he said the right way to approach it, and if we think we want to be able to do it going forward, that we'll just get in touch with him sooner than later, so he could research to see, do we even have to do a permit? And the other thing that they want to focus on, when you do drain downs, it doesn't mean you drain the lake way down. You're going to drain it down a couple feet just to pull the water away from the shorelines. And when you do that, you do it for a very short period of time because you don't want to disrupt the aquatic life. So you typically, like if you did it like in the end of October, you'd want to be filled back up by December. Give it enough time to freeze off, but then you want to refill it right back up. And the last part with plant vegetation and management, service company, we're in the process of, we'll talk about all these things in detail as we go on, but a contract for the 2021 season. Any comments or questions?
Hey, Wally, it's Neil. Just a quick question.
Sure.
With regard to these topics, is this something that when I see urgently discussed as the first topic, a direction that the board's going to want to go in as soon as possible, or is this going to still be a conversation for a few months?
No. This means that we got to do this now before we actually get filled. This is one of my targets to get it done by the end of this week. We had 3 points of contact we needed to complete. One was with Solitude, the second was with Northeast Aquatic, and the other was with the Orange County DPW. Erica and I will actually be on a conference call with Orange County DPW tomorrow. I've already completed the discussion with Northeast Aquatic, and Erica is working on making contact with Solitude Lake Management. Erica, do you have anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Neil, and I know with Molly and I, our fear is that if it's not done quickly, a lot of the floating vegetation is going to end up being sunken vegetation, in which case you're not going to be able to do anything about it.
Yep.
Even though the phosphorus level will be released more slowly than previous, the more we get off, the better. So it needs, as you said, it needs to be done fairly quickly.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to talk about a little more detail on that as we get into the next slide. Okay, Erica, do you want to add anything?
I can speak to the budget if you'd like me to do that.
Sure.
Or we can save that. Okay. So in previous years, we had budgeted under maintenance contracts for all of the lake treatments. Previous years, we budgeted about $50,000. This year, we didn't need quite as much. We budgeted $28,600 for different types of lake treatments. So we do have some space in the budget. I have to go look because I believe that what Northeast has been able to do for us was taken out of that line item, but it's still got to be pretty close to that number. So we do have some monies in the budget to move forward with
Okay. Yeah.
some treatment options.
Okay, so Erica, thank you for that. Neil and Fred, now in light of your comment, I deeply appreciate and I agree with everybody. Keep that as we get to the end. Remember I was talking about the actions. We don't want to come away with hard actions that we want to take away from this. Make sure you're writing down your actions so we get to that part of this meeting that we're capturing those. Okay, this is a lot of words, but I'll roll it up pretty quickly. I did have a discussion with Northeast Aquatics 2 days ago. And the problem we talked about is what we just said. As anticipated, there's large quantities of vegetation are becoming floating mats and collecting in the easterly shoreline, driven by the wind direction. Consequences, obviously, it impedes access to the lake from the shorelines, and we could miss the opportunity to remove a large quantity of biomass, which long-term could help reduce our phosphorus internal loading. When I was talking to Northeast Aquatics, the first part they wanted to know is how much of it is actual floating and how much of it is rooted. Because floating you could deal with, rooted you cannot deal with in the same manner because you don't want to pull the plants out by the roots because that disturbs the sediment. Part of all this is an evaluation by the company to come out here and say, okay, what can they do and how much is it and how soon can you do it? And as you'll see as I talk through this, so we may need to come up with a different plan. Removing the biomass will have multiple benefits to the lake health and water. Plants out there in our lake will decompose at different levels as far as it's impacted by the oxygen that's available to support decomposition. In the shallower areas, it'll decompose faster in the 1 to 3 foot areas. Out in the center of the lake where it gets 16 to 20 feet deep, you could be looking up to 10 years for it to fully decompose, which is a good thing because then you're not releasing all the phosphorus and the nutrients right back into the water at the same time. Their comment was that the floating harvester, which we had spoke about earlier, That was a potential recommended option that we should be considering. Their company does not do it, but they did recommend two companies. One was Solitude and the other was Aqualogic in New Jersey. They did say Solitude has larger and better equipment. In addition to that, from our standpoint, Solitude is actually the company we've been using in the past to do our treatments. So we do have a working relationship with them. Northeast Aquatics did offer that they could provide on-site recommendations and supervise the harvester. And I said, okay, why do we really need a middleman to do that? And their only answer was the benefit is they will be telling them where to go versus just allowing them to go where they want. But I think on our lake, it's pretty obvious where we need it.
How available? What's their timeline? How available are they?
That's with Solitude, and Erica has been working feverishly to make that contact with them. She's had multiple emails or multiple phone calls, multiple emails trying to get that point of contact. And I don't think they had to give a positive response back to her yet. So we need to bubble that up higher. So to answer your question is we don't know how soon, because one of the things, and we'll talk about it in here, is one of our concerns is it is the spring of the year. We're not the only lake in New York State or in New Jersey or Connecticut. These companies support a lot of other areas. They have a limited amount of resources and a limited amount of equipment. So if we miss the window, we may not be able to call on them at all. We'll be looking for somebody else to come out here and help. Their big point was reach out right now to get the quotes. Don't be waiting because the companies are booking up quickly. And like I said, the equipment may not be available. Typical cost, just from their experience, was about $2,000 to show up and about $1,500 a day to run the system to remove the vegetation, which isn't crazy. It's not a crazy high level cost. I said, okay, if we can't get to these companies from their experience, what else did they see for opportunities to be able to remove it? They said that they actually saw where the lake people got together through volunteers, use rowboats, and they put a net between them and they go out there and corral it and bring it to the shorelines and take it out that way.
We do have a lot of pontoons on the lake.
I'm sorry?
So we do have a lot of pontoon boats on the lake too.
We do. We definitely have a lot of pontoons, but my concern is I think we want to do right now, one of the problems is getting a pontoon onto the lake. And right now the
right.
The boat launch
Challenge.
is boat launch we can't get to because that's blocked up right now. We're waiting it to fill up to that level. So we'd have to look at other opportunities.
Right.
And the area where the vegetation is collecting is not a very deep area.
Right.
Even with a kayak, sometimes you end up in a little bit of trouble. So
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Well, one of our focuses, if we do anything, we want to think through this very, very deeply. We want to look at it, safety being paramount. We're not going to risk anybody's life at all trying to do this thing. If it's not safe, we're not going to try this at all. So, but that's just one of the other approaches that they had recommended. And they could provide a lot more information to us on how to approach it if we cannot get the support we need from an external company like Solitude. And then from obviously, once you get the vegetation out, you need to get rid of it. So fortunate but not fortunate is that everything is being blown into the eastern cove area, which that's on reserves 1, 2, and 3. So my thought is we'd probably be using the reserve areas just to pull the material into that area to remove it.
How quickly can the county work on a contract? Are they up to the task right now?
We have to have that discussion with them tomorrow, Tom. Obviously, the county that gets kind of stuck around the axle once in a while because they say, well, because of this, we have to actually go out for competitive bid. This could take 60 days. That don't work. You have to be able to sole source it directly to a company. And then to your point, we need to be able to get the contract in place. From my experience, I worked with Northeast Aquatics yesterday. Within one day, they turned around a draft contract that they needed to support us with the testing and stuff we need done. And we got that to the county in less than 24 hours.
Yeah, it's the county that I'm typically worried with.
Yeah, we're gaining some leverage with them because we have to ride them hard. Just like you saw with the dam, unless you're keeping on top, show me a schedule and hold them accountable for every step in the schedule, things can drift on you.
Yep.
So, and everybody has a boss and you bubble it up.
Wally, I have a kind of general question. Right now, as you mentioned, the winds are kind of blowing it all to the one section.
Yep.
Is there any chance that when the water starts to crest over the dam,
Mhm.
that shifts in any way? Like that it starts getting pulled out to the center of the lake, or you think it'll still
From my experience living on lake now for 5 years is that everything goes east, even with it going over the dam.
Yeah.
Eventually it finds its way down there, but I know in front of my house, everything comes from Bart's house to my house and gets stuck in my dock.
Well, and also depends on if there's a lot of rain. If we're lucky enough to get a ton of rain, because I'm in the northern section and we get a flow. So I get to see, I've seen algae blooms move out. I've seen debris move out if you get a lot of rain. So I know that's a cross your fingers kind of thing, but
Gotcha. And you're located, Chris, we're up in the north section up by the boat launch area that way?
just past the inlet, like where the small island is.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, beach and shore.
I understand. Okay, thanks. Any other questions before we move on?
I have a question regarding the how. I have a quick question regarding the biomass. Once we collected them on the reserves, what do we do with them? Do they just sit there, or do we remove them?
Yeah, they'll be removed. We'll work with the county on our right approach to do that. I know Erica had success dealing with the county in the past where we actually had stumps that were removed from the lake bed. They were pulled up onto the reserves, and you go through the county to get the county to get the company to come out and actually take it away.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. Good question. Okay, so the water quality testing program, where are we with that right now? For the lake, the CSLAP, the volunteers have been established for the year now, and training is scheduled. Is that correct, Fred? That there's actually training that takes place with this?
Yes, we're currently waiting for Nancy Muller, who's head of the CSLAP testing, to set up a training schedule. Normally, the testing period starts in June. In fact, it isn't until the beginning of June that we normally get the sampling bottles and everything else for it. So we're waiting to hear from her as far as what's being set up. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, Molly and I have been doing this for years. And if it ever came down, push to shove, and we got the equipment, the two of us could train any of the volunteers with current methods unless they've made changes.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that, Fred. The if everybody recalls, back when we had Northeast Aquatics do the sediment sampling, they had mentioned that they wanted to do additional samples in what they referred to the deep water area near the dam, which at that time they were saying was not accessible. We did talk to them before we started filling and said, you want to do it now? Well, it's easy to get out there and do it, or would you rather wait till we fill? And based on their experience, they preferred to wait till we're filled. So we're working with them right now to arrange and get that part done. Storm sewer and sewage lines. Again, we're looking for, this is looking at all the water testing and things that could be impacting us. Storm sewer and sewage lines, one of the residents had given us a call, I think it was about a month, maybe 6 weeks ago, it's kind of running together right now, where she said there was a manhole covering a sewer line, which is part of the New Windsor sewage system, down on the front of her property, which is about 7 feet from the lake edge. And there was, she sent pictures of, there's actually toilet paper coming out of the manhole into the lake, which is evidence that there was sewage being dumped directly into the lake.
I have seen that myself as well on my property.
You have? Okay. Chris, I probably want to follow up with you because one of the things we need to do is determine extent of condition on that.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen 3 times in 6 years where we had such an inflow that it was almost coming up like a geyser. And one time we had a pressure situation well over for a day that when it was all done, there was debris in my yard.
Okay.
Toilet paper and yeah.
Yeah. Do you know if that's New Windsor or Corn? That's got to be New Windsor up by you there.
It's the New Windsor sewer because it comes right through my backyard.
Okay. Yeah, it's the same then.
In the past, the town has been advised of that as well. And from what I recall, there was less than a real strong determination that would never happen again. It's needs to be brought up probably with the town again.
I had a lengthy discussion with the town supervisor again the day after I went out and walked this down with the homeowner. and went over and I said, basically, here's the deal. It's completely unacceptable. You need to resolve it. And he went into that they're trying to get control over all of the runoff water that's being put into the sewage lines, which is overloading the system and causing these geysers when we have a lot of heavy duty rain. If you went to this lady's house, she had about a 150-foot vertical drop from her house where the sewer line goes straight downhill and makes a hard 90-degree turn to the left, go out to the pumping station. So if you have a lot of water going there, it's just not designed to be able to handle the runoff, probably like what Chris was seeing. And as a result of that, because it can't make the turn, it goes up and it comes out of the loose manhole cover. I did talk to the town superintendent about it, and I said, I'm not going to tell you how to do your job, but you got to solve it. He acknowledges that. I said, your studies are great that you're doing, but I need this particular, if we come up with a specific point source like this, it got to be corrected. You could do your studies beyond that part, but for this one here, you got to figure out how to solve it.
Well,
Hey,
one thing, Wally, you might be able to ask them, because they did come by last summer and claim they did a clean out.
Mhm.
I was approached by New Windsor workers and they said, we're gonna be by tomorrow. They flagged all the manholes, my yard, a few properties down, and they said that they were doing a manual clean out, I guess, of whatever they can access by hand. So
Okay.
maybe, yeah, I don't know how often they do that.
Yep. But I'd like to do, I'm going to take an action to follow up with the town supervisor to see what they have done now. What are the positive actions they put in place?
I have not gotten an email back from them on that, Wally, but I will say it is, you mentioned it was a new town supervisor.
Yep.
So we're hoping to build a better working relationship with the town also.
Yeah, he was very positive and came across as he was going to be very proactive. He did say he was also working with the Randazzo from Cornwall, the Cornwall supervisor, to make sure that everybody's on the same page trying to deal with this. So anyway, I'll take an action to follow up and figure out that, but I also need to figure out what's the extended condition. So I appreciate your insight there, Chris.
Speaking of Cornwall, I believe we've had the same issue on one of their wastewater manholes as well.
Okay, in the Cornwall area?
Yep. I think if you look back in the notes, you'll see that that's come up previously as well.
Okay,
Yeah, I believe it's right by Reserve 1. In fact, I've seen it coming out of the manhole cover.
okay,
Yep, across from 116 Shore.
okay.
Yep.
But I think that's resolved. I haven't heard anything more. After that, there was a big mess and then I think it was resolved.
Okay. Yeah, the one I'm referring to over on the other property, that was very much an active one. There was still toilet paper laying there. When I was out there walking it down, the New Windsor actually came out, sent a couple laborers to rake up the toilet paper and clean the area up a little bit. But we had talked about coming up with a different design for the manhole cover. Can you bolt it in place with a double seal gasket? Their concern with that is for pressure relief. I guess manhole covers actually serve a function as a pressure relief, but there's other mechanisms that they can use to compensate for that if they needed to. Okay, any more questions on that, the sewage lines? And feeder stream and tributaries. Tom, you had offered up information a while ago that you were aware that Little Britain School, I guess, has a speedies permit for putting treated water into a tributary that actually feeds into our lake. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's fairly old data and probably goes back 10 years ago, but I see, no reason that they probably don't still have that. And I believe it was in the neighborhood of 5,000 gallons a day potential. And the way I understood it was partially treated. So I really never got to the fact is I'm assuming it's probably a brownwater issue on that, but I think it should definitely be looked into to see what's going in there.
Okay.
And quite frankly, the DEC will be able to tell you in a heartbeat whether or not there's still a speedies permit for Little Britain.
Okay. Do you know where that tributary actually feeds into the lake?
That's our main tributary, to my knowledge, which is up in the northeast corner.
Okay, so it's the actual main stream that
Yep.
comes in.
Yep, the mainstream.
Okay. And you also mentioned about a trailer park off Station Road.
Yeah, this goes back to the Larry Rossini conversation years ago as well, but the other tributary, from what I understand, or at least talking with Larry, rolls right by the, come on, what is it, Beaver Dam Estates, or, you know, I forget the name of the trailer park up there on, come on,
Station Road there.
Station Road, yeah, right off Station Road, right before the turn.
Yep.
That one rolls right by their facility and down our direction. So if indeed they've got failing systems up there, it's going to impact us directly as well.
Okay.
That's just one of the other most likely areas to take a look at as far as
Okay.
input.
Yeah, what this does, it all aligns with the recommendations coming from CSLAP and also Northeast Aquatics. And what they're comment on is identify what they refer to as the hotspots that are coming into the lake. If you can identify and control those things, it would minimize the need to be controlling things with chemicals later on, which is more of a correction mode rather than a prevention mode. So one of the things we need to do short order also is follow up when we're talking to Northeast Aquatics. That's part of the contract that they had sent it to us, Erica. They included in there the additional testing to help identify these sources coming in from or the external sources coming in. That'll help direct where much you need to focus your efforts to try to fix anything and maintain it. Okay, and then the other hot topic is the lakefront homeowners.
This is Kevin Phillips. Question.
Yes, Kevin.
When we talk about feeders, is this where I could ask that question about how much comes from Stewart to us?
Absolutely. Now's a good time as any. Go ahead.
Well, you know, I've attended 3 RAC meetings now, and certainly growing frustration with all that's going on there. And they were very clear and transparent about how little of the runoff they're able to treat. And they basically say that they can treat up to 500 gallons, and some storms it goes up to 100,000 gallons per time period. I forget what the time period is. And so they say that it goes into that pond and then into Moodna Creek and then into the Hudson River. So I'm not sure what that means for us, or if we have any data from the past, or any suspicions from the past, or if even our PFAS, because they're saying that PFAS is going straight into the river with that stormwater. If our PFAS is coming from them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I know, Erica, I think you had some exposure to attending a couple of the meetings with Stewart and with the PFAS and the PFOA, the concerns with that. Because one of our concerns is right now, we're basically, our lake was drained. We had sediment there, and now we're going to refill the lake. Do we still have a problem with PFAS and going forward? That's something that we need to identify and work forward with. And I think that's where you're coming from, Kevin. Is that something we need to address, the PFAS in our lake?
Well, no, I'm just wondering, are we continuing to get this polluted water that Stewart is very clearly saying is
Yes.
that they're leaving?
Yes. So they're treating what they can, exactly what you just said. The issue, I think, is that Beaver Dam Lake is a relatively low priority because it's not a drinking water source. And the PFAS, the EPA's advisory level for PFAS isn't even really enforceable, and it's relatively new. So the idea of why PFAS is harmful is that it bioaccumulates in the system over a lifetime. So if it's in drinking water at the quantity of the advisory level, it's something that is being dealt with. But our lake isn't drinking water, and it wasn't, even though it's not drinking water, it wasn't over that level in the lake in the first place. So I think, number one, we're probably a pretty low priority. Number two, nobody wants any contaminants at all in their watershed, obviously. But the level that was there isn't high enough that they consider it to be harmful over time.
Well,
Those
Erica-
chemicals are also ever present in a lot of the household chemicals that we use. It was just, I think, maybe 2 summers ago that they had to phase it out of firefighting equipment. So if it happens again, up till 2 summers ago, we could have been in the same mess. It's in a lot of the household products. I believe the meeting with DOH back a couple of years ago at the Washingtonville High School, they were expressing that they tested the water at a resident's house in Beaver Dam, but they had their carpets shampooed that day. And because they had their carpets shampooed that day, the water actually tested out of their tap, tested high because it was in the air from the carpet shampoo. So
That's baloney. That's baloney. It has,
Yeah.
that they,
well, no, they went back.
cleaned it.
They went back and tested the water again to double check, and that's what they ended with. So that being said, some of the wells did test positive. On the county website, you can look at which wells tested positive and to what level they tested, and those people were given household filtration systems.
Right,
But again,
right.
those were the wells. The community water, I won't call it the community water, the American water system that 180 some homes are on, that was tested, and it's not in those wells, but the private wells that were tested, some tested positive and they were given home filters for it. But the amount that's in the lake, because the lake is not drinking water, I mean, we're still going to see some PFAS in our lake. And Stuart is taking efforts.
Paula, you and I talked about this previously, and it's probably going to come up during the restocking section. But the reason, other than a few homes testing even trace amounts, the reason we had a problem was not the amount of PFOA, PFOS in the water in the lake. It was the accumulation, as was mentioned previously, in the fish. It's fat accumulated. And now these fish are gone. So and I'm sure Wally's going to bring this up later about how we address this.
okay. Yeah, we have a one-liner in there about it, Fred, but I like Kevin's comment. I just don't want to accept things for being what they are without taking an action to follow up on it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I understand your comment now, Kevin, as far as they're still contributing to it. As Eric had talked about, you got to think in terms of watershed. There's a watershed that all comes through our lake, but on a bigger scale of things, we're all part of a larger watershed. So at a very high level, I think, Tom, you could speak to this a little bit, but Simon Gruber, he was the past president of the Hudson Valley Watershed. He might be a good person to speak to on this also.
Well, since I don't see Moodna on your feeder, that I don't have a picture in my head of how Moodna feeds us or impacts us.
Moodna doesn't impact us at all.
Yeah,
Uh,
Moodna
it-
is below us.
We flow into Moodna, not the other way around.
Okay.
Crestview Lake, which is part of New Windsor, that's bisected by International Boulevard, that feeds into us because that goes past Little Britain.
I believe you're right.
Okay.
But yeah, I personally think that that on the overall picture, it would not be a bad idea for us to have some semi-expert take a look at the total watershed and do an analysis of our watershed. And way back when, I'm talking again, probably 15 years ago, we had proposed to do just that. And at that particular time, the DPW kind of poo-pooed the idea. But this may come up a little bit later on as to the long-term fix that we want to put in place. I don't know that you can really do a proper long-term for plan unless you have an overall watershed review. So I think we got to look at the big picture sooner or later.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Tom. And that's kind of what we're doing with Northeast Aquatics right now. We're looking at the bigger picture.
Yep.
So I appreciate it. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for that, Kevin. The other thing, the lakefront homeowners, we all have a role in this, like we talked about with the fertilizers, the gardens that people are starting to plant, their downspouts, make sure that we're controlling what we can control. There's some good discussions that we had today as part of the training we were going through, as far as how much phosphorus is actually being contributed to the lake from property owners. And it's crazy the volume that actually comes out from here. So one of the things, Erica, you did a good job sending out that communication on the homeowner fertilizer, and Freddie chimed in on it. I think we need to do more communication with lakefront property owners, just to drive that point home stronger. Because a lot of people, the people want to do things that are right, but I don't think everybody knows what is right.
How about using the sandwich boards, even just to, I mean, there's still people that don't come to meetings. So just using the sandwich boards to say what fertilizers are just no good.
Okay.
Just an idea.
Chris, what do you mean by a sandwich board?
So the boards that we put up near Cumberland Farms, ones that announce the meetings.
Okay, that's what I thought you may just wanted to confirm. So the
Yeah,
communication
because
board.
I think there's a lot of people that are still in an analog world, and despite how connected we are, I think that just might be another way, another method to get knowledge out.
Okay.
And maybe even a home, old time handout.
Yeah, postcards in the mailbox or something.
Yeah, targeted handout to lakefront.
I'll walk them around.
Yeah. Yeah, just old fashioned flyers.
Okay.
Sandwich boards are a good idea. We do have a pretty big reach via Facebook, and we have the email list too. We've, something like 500 emails. So if we had a couple of points we wanted to make, what I've learned by the responses that we get is people don't tend to read very long emails. So if there's something we can give a picture of and they can read in 2 seconds, or it's as short as a Facebook post, or we can put a commercially kind of thing up on the YouTube channel. We've got some video editing capability too, if we wanted to do a little educational video. We don't have to reinvent the wheel either. I was looking at some other districts that are kind of like ours, and NYSFOLA has a couple of videos that aren't super applicable, but we can tag those in too. So if there's a few specific points that we want to make to homeowners, if you let me know, I can certainly get the word out.
Okay. Yeah, let's take that as an action, Erica. I think it's not a once and done. It's an ongoing communication that we got to do. And to your point, there's a lot of other homeowners organizations out there that have already been down this road. I've actually seen, just like you said, there's some good stuff out there we could steal with pride.
So if you had, say, top 3 bullet points that you wanted homeowners to know, the fertilizer, give me 2 other ones that you want folks to know.
Yeah. Well, think about it from the standpoint, we don't want things running into the lake. So, and the big thing you're trying to control is phosphorus. So number 1 is the fertilizer. Anytime you put the fertilizer on the ground, if the middle number is not 0, you're directly contributing. The second thing is the runoffs directly across their property. If they have their downspouts coming right off the roof, right into the yard, all it's going to do, especially if you don't have a buffer between their yard and the lake edge, it's just going to flow right into the lake, just flush out the phosphorus right into the lake. And the other is the gardens, what I'm seeing. But let's open it up to the team here, see what they think.
One other thing that I have personally seen, that if someone who lives along the lake has a lawn cutting service or a landscaping service, to make sure that they are aware of not blowing anything into the lake, because it's a very easy thing for them to do, is to just blow it that way and they don't have to worry about picking it up.
Yep, that's a really good point, Fred, to that. I actually spoke to True Green. I called them and said, hey, you service a lot of homes around the area here. And I said, what do you guys do for your fertilizer? He says, well, because that's right there in the lake area, we make sure that it's phosphorus free. That they don't.
I believe it's a New York State rule that it has to be phosphorus free.
You're right, Fred. Nowadays, at least in New York, you shouldn't be able to buy it.
Okay. Yep. And the other thing to your point, Fred, is I personally saw some neighbors that comes time, like even in the fall, they're cleaning up their leaves to get their leaf blower out and they blow all the leaves right into the lake. And who's ever upwind is now going to own those leaves in addition to what it contributes to the lake.
The lake bottom is going to own them for years.
Yeah, exactly. So I actually told the neighbor, look, I said, instead of doing that, I'll come over and pick your leaves up for you. Don't do that. It becomes my problem anyway.
And that type of knowledge, I think, is valuable for some people. Just miss it, and they just, whether it's laziness or they just want to just get rid of their leaves and they think nobody's looking.
Yep.
They just, yeah, if that point's driven home, that'd be good.
Yeah.
With,
You can do it in a
with
way that's kind of entertaining and out there and light. I think the overall vibe in the community right now, especially with the lake refilling, is really positive, and we can take advantage of some of that energy. So it's not like this New York says this is illegal. Like, we can make it a little bit more.
Mhm. Yeah.
You know, one other thing that I put on to the board, it's nothing like hitting somebody in the purse when it comes to awakening. I'm sure if you thought about it, the worst condition or the more deterioration of the lake, the lower their home values are going to be. We all have bought here, or most of us have bought here, because we have a usable lake. And just as when we were debating whether we should bother fixing the dam or just drain the lake, without a usable lake, the property values are going to decline like crazy. So I think if homeowners realize that it's for their own economic protection, that they need to abide by these suggestions.
I agree with you, Fred.
And Fred, Zillow.com has already recognized that, because without the usable lake, they discounted all of our values by 75,000 apiece.
Wow.
And I assume that will, bounce back now that we have a lake back, but that's where it is currently.
Interesting.
on your point, your first point with respect to the gardens, the garden location is pretty important. If what really assists is if you have a buffer in between, and I haven't personally spent the money and time to do it myself, but it's good practice if you had a 10-foot buffer that was essentially not in lawn and essentially tilled with just plants periodically placed, or trees, what have you. That will absorb, I think, close to 90% of any runoffs that coming off a lawn into the lake itself.
Yep.
So if you're going into the garden part of it, I think it's what it's really called is a riparian buffer, which essentially keeps the water from going directly off of your property into the lake, but then puts it into the recharge through this riparian buffer.
I think Nice Bola actually has a program where you can apply and they'll send you a free like buffer plant seed packet.
Okay.
So we can call that out, but also maybe one of the things that we can do to show residents how to do this is practice what we preach a little bit, pick a reserve and do it right in
Good
one
idea.
section of the reserve
That's
and make it, generate a little bit of publicity around it.
Mhm. That's a heck of a good idea.
Yeah.
Wish I thought of that.
That's why we have Eric on our team. Excellent.
That's why Erica gets paid the big bucks.
Yeah. Yeah. Erica, one of the things we want to talk about later on, not in this call here, but the biochar system that they were talking about in Nice Fola, utilizing them on the reserve areas where the runoff comes directly into the lake right there. If their point source is the biochar, might be a good, it's very crazy and expensive, and it might be a good practice just to try and see if it does anything. Okay, any more comments before I proceed? Starting to run out of time here a little bit. I'm going to speed this up here a little bit. I did have a discussion with Northeast Aquatics, again, like you talked about, relative to the sampling. The postponed sampling we did last year, we're going to pick that up now this year. During their visit, they recommended conducting other water quality samples. Hillary from Northeast Aquatics sent a draft proposal in the contract that was forwarded to the county yesterday, or today it was actually. So that's with them right now. Overall, we need to improve the water quality monitoring. From their perspective, when they came out here, they said that we were very, very reactive. We were treating our lake by using predominantly chemicals to get through what we're doing versus really doing the water quality monitoring like we should have to identify the sources and avoid it rather than waiting to get it into the lake. We need to identify if the watershed is a big contributor to the nutrient loading. Implemented inlet sampling as identified in their report, and if CSLAP will not take those samples, they will take them. I think, Fred, you already reached out to CSLAP. They said that they would not take them. So I think we need to work with Northeast Aquatics.
That's correct. They're really not set up for that sort of thing. And the thing that it's a shame for our needs is the CSLAP, as Tom probably is aware, that it's a single point sample taken at probably one of the deepest points in the lake. So Wally, you and I have been talking about doing some additional testing just to get a better view. And it looks like we're going to have to go with another source besides Nicola.
Yep, I agree, but that's an action that we got, Fred, and we need to follow up on that. The other thing that they had offered Northeast Aquatics, with fees just directly into what we were just talking about, we need to have a very strong unified message to all the homeowners and their roles for maintaining the water quality, which is pretty much exactly what we were talking about. Lake treatment program, just to catch everybody up. The treatment plan for 2021, the county is preparing the request for proposal for the service contract for this year. Solitude was the service company in the past years, but they need to go out for competitive bid. They just can't sole source it to Solitude. One recommendation that did come from Northeast Aquatics, it takes time to get permits for treatments. And because we have a new lake, we don't really know what we're getting into yet. Our water clarity is incredibly good right now. And we're hoping it stays that way, but we don't know which way it'll go once the decomposition of the vegetation starts kicking in. And they say it takes a while to get the permit. So even while we're in the process of getting the RFPs finalized and the contract finalized, start working with the company, assuming it's going to be Solitude, to make sure that the permit's there if we need it.
Can we go into a contract and not use their service? In other words, my concern would be you go ahead and sign up for a full contract, and lo and behold, we really don't need it at the end of the day.
No.
And especially with respect to any contract that would be working on the weeds themselves or the aquatic weeds. I'm quite doubtful that we're going to end up with a substantial weed issue this year anyway, due to the drawdown.
Yeah.
So is the contract that you're looking for both for the aquatic weeds as well the algae treatment, or what's the plan there?
Yeah, Erica, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think it would all be encompassed under one contract. And if we have to go through a request for proposal, I think we'd be able to indicate that in the RFP, but I am not positive on that. So we have a call with DPW tomorrow and I'll bring up that question.
If I can interject one thing to answer Tom, once a contract in the past has been signed, we can determine during that period if we don't want certain periods of testing, or I'm not sorry, treatment, because a few years ago, we decided instead of going with 5 algicide treatments, we only went with 3. So it wasn't a case of, well, you had to do it because you said 5. So it is flexible from my knowledge.
That's the way it used to be when I was doing it. And, I just wanted to make sure that we still had the option. Because I would tailor the treatments to the situation at hand at the time. And we off time went with, quite a few less treatments. Whether that's the case on the aquatic weed issue as well. I would hope with the drawdown and the freeze that we had, that we're going to end up with next to zero aquatic weed issue this year.
You're right.
Yeah, to your point, Tom, we had this discussion with Northeast Aquatics also when they did the study for us. And they had actually said the same thing, that they believe that there's a strong possibility we are not going to need any treatments for this year.
Okay, good. I didn't make it up then.
No, you didn't, unless you work for Northeast Aquatics.
Wally, I'm just reminding you that you asked for time and
Yep.
we're almost to 7.
Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to proceed through the rest of these slides pretty quickly, just to respect everybody's time. And I'll send out everything to everybody. If you have any additional comments, please just comment back to me. Other options we talked about, aeration and bubblers. Thank you, Tom, for reaching out to Solar Bee to look at, not to Solar Bee directly, but other lakes and lake owners basically that were using systems like Solar Bee. You got some input from them, which we need to follow up on more of that. Now that we're transitioning past the dam construction and the lake fill, we're getting more into this stuff here.
Do we need a permit for that? That's my only question about aerators. Do we need permits for aerators?
Here's the answer to that. I'm going to talk to the DEC about that, because I think aerators are a good idea. We were talking about, if you had an algae bloom, could it cause airborne issues in the air because you have an aeration system? And the response came back from, I forgot who the presenter was now, but they said they don't have any evidence or any data that says that that is a problem. But to your question specifically, if we put aerators in the lake, do we need a permit from the DEC to do that? So I appreciate that.
Another point to the aerators is when we discussed it with Northeast Aquatic, one of the things that they said was they have a lot of cases where lakes put aerators in without collecting data on where those aerators should be or how powerful they should be in advance. And they waste a lot of money on aeration in the wrong spaces and the wrong sizes. So collecting data to understand where the phosphorus is most concentrated in the sediment and which areas are the lowest oxygen areas would be beneficial before we were to make an investment like that.
Yep. Yeah. To your point there, and a good question, all of these next 4 bullets, these are all things that we're not saying we're moving forward with, but they're things that could be on the table if we needed to, but you need to have data to say it's worthwhile to spend the money. And we'll find that out through testing. So you got aeration and bubblers, erosion control, the trees for trib, which is tributaries, and buffer in a bag. I think we'll include that in the homeowner communication, Eric, if that's okay. A floating wetland island was another option, was talked about a while ago, and lakescaping. Just to respect everybody's time, I'm going to keep moving. Fish and aquatic life, just very quickly. We got to be careful how we approach this. There is money available. We have $17,000. Is that correct, Erica? I lost Erica.
I think she's muted.
Okay.
I said continue. I'm double checking the number right now.
Okay, thank you. And then we just don't want to go spend money and put fish in there if they're all going to die, but we have to make sure we determine the best timing based on reestablishing our lake to ensure survivability. Northeast Aquatics preliminary recommendation is to hold off for a year to see how the lake recovers, but they do have a fish guru that works for them. I have a follow-up action to talk with him in more detail about that, but we're not going to just start restocking unless it's the right time to do it.
And it's also going to invite outside fishermen if the word gets out that the lake now has fish again. So
Yeah.
waiting a year, I think is.
Yeah, and it's a science to it too. You just don't go put fish in there. You have to have the right size. You have to have feeder fish. You have to choose what kind of fish will be right for this lake. And if you put big fish and little fish in, the big fish eat the little fish, and you lost everything you're trying to achieve. So
For this year, we had 15,000 designated to it in our budget, and potentially other money from elsewhere that I won't get into right now,
Okay.
For fish. And then we'll have to decide on a number for next year also.
Okay, and that budget will roll over to next year if we don't use it. That's correct?
It'll go into surplus, yes.
Okay, thank you. Adding fish will change the nutrient dynamics in a negative direction because it increases the rate of organic matter conversion. The fish eat the plants and starts turning things over. So it has to be part of the bigger plan. It's not just as simple as just going out and putting fish in. I believe we need to reemphasize the catch and release. what you don't want to do is spend a lot of money restocking it, and then everything is going to get depleted because we overfish it right away. The other thing is, I think it was Chris's point, we're not sure about the POFAs that are in the sediment right now. Is that still an issue? So we need to do more follow-up on that. But for right now, it would definitely still be a catch and release program.
I believe the signage on the lake still says not to eat the fish, right?
It does, absolutely. But we have no data to support anything other than that right now. Other than the fact the lake was drained. Okay, real quick, I'm just going to buzz through these actions. And if you could send me an email with other, because I don't want to take everybody's time on this call now. If you could send me an email with your individual recommendation for actions and short-term and long-term buckets, I'd appreciate it. Consult with Northeast Aquatic Research for further insights on addressing the floating vegetation. That's in progress. I've actually completed it, but it's in progress. Obtain additional sediment samples in the deep section. Got the contract for that, or the proposal for that. Implement recommended watershed input sampling. We got a proposal for that. Review option for mechanical vegetation removal with DPW. We're going to do that tomorrow. We'll also need to follow up with the DEC. Establish volunteer groups if necessary to remove floating vegetation. And again, safety is number one with that. Push the contract with Lake Management Company just to make sure we're lined up. So if we need it, we'll have it. Ensure permits are obtained in advance to avoid delays, which is what we talked about. Renew our 2021 CSLAP sampling commitment. That's complete. Attend the NYSVOLA conference. That's in progress. Long-term, after the lake refills, decide on the need for lake treatments. There may not be needed at all for 2021. Implement the recommended sampling from CSLAP and Northeast Aquatics. That's part of the short-term and long-term. I don't see this being an issue for this year, but in the past we had volunteer groups to remove invasive weeds like water chestnuts and that, if needed. I don't see that being a problem this year, but we may get into some other issue where we do need volunteer groups. And educate homeowners on their roles, as we talked about earlier. Erica, thank you for taking that. And establish a relationship with the service companies, which will be Northeast Aquatics and Solitude for now, most likely going to be Solitude. Okay, if you could, like I said, everybody would take an action just to send me what you think are other feasible actions that we need to take on the short term and long term, I appreciate it. And other than that, any final comments or feedback?
Wally, what's the email address? Is it going to the regular BDL email address?
Good question. Thank you for that. Yeah, send it to the regular BDL board email address, and Eric will forward it to me. Okay, any other comments or feedback?
I'm going to put it in the email. Other questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm good. Fred, do you have any closing comments at all?
Just that I'd like to meet with you or Erica or whomever, so that we can take a look at the feed lines coming into the lake to get some additional in-house sampling for the phosphorus levels. Because if we've happened, I mean, not that we can control a lot of it. I mean, it is what it is. But if we see that particular ones have the highest levels, we could look at remediation methods at that particular site.
Thank you for that, Fred. That's part of what we're talking about with the sampling with Northeast Aquatics, also to do the testing on distributaries.
Oh, so they're going to do it?
Well, we'll discuss who's going to do it, because we have the action. We'll follow up with it. And Molly, do you have any other comments? Is Molly still there?
Here, yeah, it's, I guess, just only the, just, you know, like, just the immediacy of sucking this stuff up, because it looks like it's getting smaller. I'm afraid it's stinking. As we get rain on top of it, it's getting wetter, and I'm afraid it's going to go down. And before everybody gets all their ducks in a row, but we're doing what we can.
Yeah, but speaking of ducks and turtles, they love it.
You got my word that we're working on it as quick as we can now.
Thank you
Actually,
so much.
birds too. Birds were all flocked on, and they were nibbling on bits of it, seeds and stuff.
Yeah.
I've seen the USDA out oiling the goose eggs again, by the way. So we did renew that. And so the geese problem is being dealt with the same way it has in the past.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay. Tom Coral, do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, one of my thoughts might be that we might contact Maduro, it's the Solar Bee folks, and ask them what kind of parameters that they think they need in order to assess whether a lake is a good candidate or a not good candidate for one of their systems, or
Okay.
multiple of their systems. Just so as we're going through, talking with consultants and what have you, we make sure that we get, the information that makes sense to them as well.
Absolutely. Tom, could you help out with that action?
Yeah, I can give them a ring.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Chris, are you still on?
Yes.
Yeah, do you have any comments, closing comments?
Just thank you for being so thorough. I think the one thing is maybe trying to get the timeline. I think it's maybe by the next meeting we'll have a greater understanding.
Okay. I understand. Try to get a timeline to better implement these actions that we're talking about. Okay. Kevin and Sarah?
I was just hoping that we would have another meeting sooner rather than later.
Meeting.
Yeah. Okay, Erica, we've been doing it once a month. Are you recommending doing it more often than once a month?
No?
Okay. Yeah, next one will be in May, probably about the same, towards the third or fourth week in May, we'll do it, if that's okay with you.
Thank you.
Do we want to call it the last Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. or 6 p.m.?
Let's call it the last Thursday of the month at 6 p.m. meeting.
Does that work for everybody? Or is that bad? You made a cameo from my kid again. I'm sorry, but does that work for folks?
Yep. Works with me, so if anybody else is good, we're good. Neil, any comments?
I would be happy to put in an email, but I just want to echo that earlier comment that the floating vegetation, now that it's currently trapped in an area, might be in our best interest to either somewhat keep it trapped off or have it removed as soon as possible, obviously for the concerns. And the other two priorities that I see are the Little Britain water, that treated water, looking into that, and the trailer park, because we know we really can't do much with the PFOSs with Stewart. Those are things that are just, we can still try to combat and have conversations, but obviously it's going to be a little bit tougher than trying to figure out if there are other things that are contributing to the negative aspects of the water. And of course, to Erica's point, there should definitely be, there are 80 plus homes that are lakefront. There should be a responsibility, and I think a little bit of possibly, keeping those lakefront owners accountable for certain things without it being in a negative. And I know the board's been really great on meetings with Q&As and on social media, but any way to keep communicating the best ways and best practices, I think we'll need to make sure the community is on board with that as well, because that's also a big contributor to the lake health.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Great comments. Okay, Lee.
Oh, hi. I have a question regarding the biomass removal. I know, the stuff is soaked with PFAS, and I think, to dispose of it, we might run into some kind of issue because, if it's just goes into a regular landfill, then, we might run into some kind of, increase the fee or something like that, or refusal.
Okay, that's a great comment. We're going to be talking to DPW tomorrow, so I'm hoping to come away with a strong action on what we're doing with this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Erica, bring it home.
I just want to say thank you guys so much for making time for this and for making this a priority tonight. I know everybody's really busy, and excited to see our lake coming back. So thank you so much, Wally and Fred. For
Yeah,
your
I think Wally put together a pretty good group here.
It is. It's all
And-
about the team. Henry Ford didn't know nothing about building cars, but he knew how to pick the right people to surround himself with.
As long as they were black, right?
Exactly. Okay, that completes the call. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very
Have a
much.
great evening.
And
Thanks.
you.
Thank you. Good night.